We are now going to move on to the University Governance and Operations meeting.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to call the January 25th, 2024 University Governance and Operations Committee meeting to order. I will ask the staff to confirm we have a quorum. I believe it's only one that left. Are we going to have a break?
No, I just have a question to
okay.
ask, but I'm still here.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Please remember that only members of the committee can provide a second to a motion. Live stream of the public meeting is available to the public on youtube.com at the ABOR Live link. So we will start this afternoon by continuing the theme of healthcare education, discussing the Arizona State University's proposed new medical school that will house its new Doctor of Medicine and MS in Medical Engineering programs. Following that, the committee will receive an update on the board's Operation Efficiency Metric project. The committee will then review the University of Arizona request to sell properties. We will also receive a legislative update. And finally, the board will receive an update of the implementation of the board's recent directives related to enhanced oversight of university finances. Before moving to our discussion items, we should approve the consent agenda, and the items on the consent agenda includes items 11, 12, and 15. Does anyone have any conflict to declare on the item schedule for consent? Hear none, I move that the committee forward to the board for approval items 11, 12, and 15 listed on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion passes. In the Strategic Committee earlier this afternoon, we engaged in a larger discussion regarding our Healthy Tomorrow initiatives. We now turn our attention specifically to the Arizona State University request to establish a new medical school that will offer an MD medical doctor degree on a Master in Medical Engineering. These are items 1 and 2 on the agenda. We will review and discuss both items together, and then we will bring 2 separate motions forward. Provost Gonzalez and Dr. Gabriel are here to discuss establishing the new medical school with the committee, as well as the 2 accompanying degree programs. So, Provost Gonzalez, is there anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Regents and Chair Mata. So we've already had a brilliant introduction to this topic, and today's request, 2 requests, are really important milestones in ABOR's Arizona Healthy Tomorrows program. So it is my pleasure to start by presenting a proposal to create the ASU School of Medicine and Advanced Medical Engineering, an essential pillar of the ASU health ecosystem. Like all schools at ASU, this new medical school will be interdisciplinary, integrating medicine, biomedical science, and engineering to prepare future doctors to address complex healthcare problems using cutting-edge technologies. The curriculum of the school will enable students to simultaneously complete a Doctor of Medicine and a Master of Science in Medical Engineering. This concurrent degree program will bring together faculty from biomedicine and engineering to train future physicians to leverage new technologies and develop novel solutions for complex healthcare problems. ASU's achievements in differentiated instructional design, coupled with its strength in technology, biomedicine, and engineering, uniquely position us to lead this very innovative approach to medical education and healthcare solutions development. In addition to its mission of training future physicians, the School of Medicine and Advanced Medical Engineering will serve as a catalyst to develop new clinical partnerships to support both research and academic programs that improve patient and healthcare outcomes. Overall, the School of Medicine and Advanced Medical Engineering, working in concert with the recently approved School for Public Health Technology within the ASU health ecosystem, will improve health education, access, and equity across Arizona. Let me turn now to the degrees, and then we can take questions on both. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay,
Go ahead, yeah,
okay.
but we'll have to do the motion.
And we'll do them
Yeah.
separate, but I'll continue with the specific degrees. So in support of the new school that I just described, ASU is delighted to present 2 degree proposals for your consideration as well: a Doctor of Medicine and a Master of Science in Medical Engineering. The Doctor of Medicine will leverage ASU's strengths to bring interdisciplinary solutions to the communities we serve by providing a rigorous medical education along with training in a mindset of innovation, research, and technology. The MD will prepare students to become medical doctors who not only excel in clinical practice, but who use biomedical and engineering practices to solve modern medical problems. The MD is designed to allow students to simultaneously complete the MS in Medical Engineering from the Ira A. Fulton Schools of Engineering. The initial years of the MD program will primarily focus on building a strong foundation of medical knowledge through small group learning and laboratory work in core subjects such as structure and function of the human body and biological processes of health and disease. Then, during the latter years, students will participate in clinical rotations, the clerkships that we heard about from our experts earlier, where they work alongside practicing physicians in different specialties. These rotations allow students to gain practical experience by directly interacting with patients, observing medical procedures, and participating in diagnosis, treatment, and follow-up care. Throughout the program, students are also exposed to medical and engineering research and encouraged to develop critical thinking, problem-solving, and decision-making skills. So that's the medical degree. The second degree, the MS in Medical Engineering, will be available as both a standalone program as well as a deeply integrated component of the MD degree. It will cultivate engineers with a specialized focus on healthcare technology by fostering a holistic approach to problem solving via project-based learning in medical contexts. It will focus on the development and application of healthcare technology able to impact health outcomes, provide service at scale, and support innovations in medicine and patient care. Students, many of whom will concurrently pursue the MD, will complete applied projects in interdisciplinary teams, including with both engineers and health professionals, combining foundational knowledge in biomedical sciences with core engineering principles and data science. Graduates will not only excel in technical expertise, but will also embody the values championed by ASU's design aspirations, actively contributing to the advancement of healthcare with a focus on societal impact, inclusivity, and excellence. So, these are the general outlines of the 2 degrees. As Dr. Gabriel described earlier, there have been many teams designing these, and there's still more work to be done, but we're excited to be at this stage. So I will let you call for the vote, but take questions before then.
Yeah.
I'll just make one additional comment. The 2 degrees being proposed, we couldn't have proposed that 3 years ago. It's only a result of the continuous process of innovation that allows us to advance our learning in engineering that would allow a medical student fully immersed in medical education to also get a master's in engineering at the same time in medical engineering. So this is an opportunity that we couldn't have taken advantage of in the past that we can take advantage of now.
Yeah, thank you. If there's any question or comments from any of the board members? Well, thank you for the discussion. And in the near future, as you were saying just recently, that this is the first step, and your team is working very hard to make this happen. So we look forward to hearing from ASU team regarding also the facilities that this will be housed. For the new medical school. That would be, very interesting to see how we have an understanding of that. And also the anticipated budget, annual budget, and the revenue needed to support the new school. So more to come on this initiative, and thank you very much. So since we have 2 motions to move forward, these are 2 items that I will do 2 separate motions. So first, I move that the committee forward to the board for approval Arizona State University request for a new academic organizational unit as described in the executive summary. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion passes. The second motion is the academics program. So I move that the committee forward to the board for approval the Arizona State University request for new academic programs as described in the executive summary. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. For the next item, the committee will receive an update from the board office on ABOR operational efficiency metrics. The board adopted these efficiency metrics in June of 2023, and the universities recently provided the initial round of data. So Brad Kendricks will present an overview of the project and a high-level summary of the initial data. And I would like to thank Regent Herbal, who has, been leading this initiative. So Brad?
Thank you, Regent Mata.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Regents. So today, as Regent Mata mentioned, we're going to do a kind of first pass over the operational efficiency metrics that we've collected under the board's leadership over the last year. So just by way of kind of reminding folks where this came from, around this time last year, Regent Herbal summoned the university CFOs as well as some board staff to put together a suite of metrics that would cover some of the economic efficiencies that the universities may be demonstrating, but also to pull some metrics from across the universities to get a better sense of how all the varied resources that the universities have are being put to use in ways that either give us opportunities to improve or that can showcase the good decision-making that the universities have. So over the course of the spring, we put that together. This was presented to the board late last spring and ultimately approved as part of the annual reporting that the board office would be doing moving forward. Since that time, we've had to wait for the finances to be finalized for the year, but late last fall and into the early parts of this month, we've been working very hard with the university teams to get this data collected in a way that we can give at least an initial report to the board so they have a sense of the fact that this work is continuing and that there may be some opportunities to dive more deeply into the data. A couple of points that I'll make before we dive into some of these examples for the 14 metrics. The first is that this is a first pass at initial reporting for the universities. So I'll lead with the caveat that we haven't had a lot of time to dive into some of the nuance, and it's important to note that each one of these metrics is a bit of a universe unto itself, with lots of opportunities to build context and to evaluate what's going on and to understand them better. So I think these will do a good job of starting to set the stage for some of the questions that you might be interested in asking, but we come humbly with the understanding that we may not have all of the answers today and may need to refine the approach as we move forward. Another piece that is worth noting that we'll revisit a few times is that one of the lenses that we're using to look at this data are threefold. The first is to compare the university's data to itself over time. The second is to compare the universities in the state in the context of Arizona, knowing that there are differences in size and scope. And the final piece is to look at peer institutions to get a sense of where each of our universities fits into that broader narrative of what's going on in higher education. But again, the goal of all of these, once we finalize it and continue to work on it, is to bake this into the board's normal metrics reporting as yet another layer that you can use to inform the questions moving forward. So with that said, we will charge ahead into some of those metrics. Now, one of the points that I made was that we do use peer groups as a way to evaluate or at least to look at the context for some of these metrics. Now, this has taken a number of different incarnations during the years, but for our purposes today, we are only looking at peer universities based on the head count of similar universities according to their research status. So for NAU, we have the research Carnegie Classification Research Level 2. We took the 6 institutions that have more enrollment and the 6 that have less than NAU. For the University of Arizona and ASU, the same approach. It just so happens that ASU does not have any institutions with more enrollment, therefore we took the 12 below. It is important to note, again, that all of these are contextual. These states are very different states. These institutions are very different institutions, but at least it gives us something to look at that helps to give us a little bit of our sense in space. So that said, I will do my best to make these metrics flow together conversationally, but what I will tell you is that since this is from across the institution, some of the shifts from slide to slide will be a little harder than others. So bear with us as we look at a tour of a variety of sort of interesting angles. So the first that we started with was net tuition revenue per student at the universities. We see this type of data from the universities a lot in our financial reporting. One of the things that's a little bit different in this collection is that we attempted to separate out on campus from online data from the universities. So you can get a sense of the trends over the last couple of years as it relates to this first pass set data. One thing that I will point out just by way of wayfinding on these slides is that if you look over to the right hand of the slide, there's a subtle but cute little arrow giving you a sense of what efficiency is in this context. Because it displays differently in each of the charts. I will mention, however, that kind of like if you point your airplane to the east, eventually you will end up in the west. Efficiency works the same way, where getting more efficient is good until it's not anymore, and then it becomes a bad student experience or some other type of thing. So in many of these cases, the best result is actually something healthily in the middle that both serves the students well and provides a good economic return. So sticking with the net tuition revenue per student, we then move to the universities as it relates to their peers. So again, wayfinding on these charts, we've put these little bars here to give you a sense of what those peer institutions come in at, so that you can both get a quick read of how the universities relate to each other within the context of Arizona, as well as how those universities relate next to their peers nationally, as we've discussed. So again, you'll see here that the net tuition revenue per student is the lowest at NAU, but as you can see from the peer groups, that also makes some level of sense given the scope and draw of students and the cost of attracting students to Flagstaff. So sticking on that theme, this is actually a new feature in any of our reporting where we've asked the universities to give us a sense of the cost of recruitment and admissions per student. So these are the figures that were reported here, and sort of consistent with that trend that we just talked about. NAU actually does experience higher student attraction costs than the other universities in the state. We note that ASU is quite low. That probably has some degree to do with the scale at which ASU is operating, and also the natural benefits of being in the most populous part of the state.
Brad, is this exclusive of scholarship awards?
Yes.
Okay.
So
not
these
include
are
this.
the costs that universities reported related to the admissions office and recruitment office staffing, as well as some marketing costs in that
Okay,
space.
thank you.
I will be the first to tell you it doesn't include everything, because there's the way the universities account for these costs, it's spread out quite well, but we tried to do our best on this first pass to get a decent sense of apples to apples how that works.
But this is not reflective of levels of scholarship or grant awards? for
Correct.
schools?
But
Okay.
this chart is.
Correct.
So here is our institutional aid rate chart. So these are the universities' rates of aid that are given to first-time undergraduate students as a share of gross tuition and fees. What I will draw your attention to, and I don't think this is a surprise to anyone here, is that NAU does have the most aggressive rate at this level. But the other thing that I'll point out that I think is actually equally important, if not more, is that all three of our universities are well above the national numbers for their peer group, which is fully explainable by the fact that many of these other contexts have more robust state aid programs and things
not
than
many,
Arizona
all.
does.
Yeah.
We are the only institutions on those lists that do not have robust state-based financial aid.
So this
So we
might be a
fund our
point of-
own state, we fund the state's financial aid through our own design.
And it's an enormous cost,
In our case, hundreds of millions of dollars
enormous.
for Arizona students alone, each year.
So while not great financially, perhaps a point of pride for the work that's been able to be done.
The fact that any of these three institutions are even still alive. It's very hard.
So moving a little bit from the revenue and student attraction side to the costs that are experienced at the universities, we go to cost of education per student. So these are education and general expenses, which you've seen before in other financial reporting. But here they are for the 2022 year compared to peers. One thing I will note, as we highlight U of A's number that is much larger than the others, is that this does include medical education, veterinary education. And if you look at the peer groups, many of those institutions also have those schools. So we haven't smoothed it out for purely like for like, but obviously you see the range of cost structures right now. And if we push beyond just the raw, top level E&G costs, here's the trend over the last couple of years. Each of the institutions is seeing some upward pressure on that cost through, I believe this is 23. But then we'll look at some of the individual elements that drive kind of overall university cost structure. So one of those is institutional support, institutional support costs. This is what you might think of as an overhead rate. These are things that are not directly student and sort of instructional or student support facing. It's things like facilities and operations and administration and so forth. And this is the ratio as a percentage of overall costs of the universities. So you'll see in these circumstances that both of our R1 universities are kind of near the median, while you see NAU on the higher end for the R2 schools that we compared them against.
So tell me again what the components of those expenses are?
So I like to think of it as everything that is not direct student support, instructional support, and teaching. So it's not part of the delivery of teaching and learning services, student life, that type of thing. It's not auxiliaries. It's administration, it's overhead, it's facilities, it's operations,
Okay,
kind of admin costs.
okay, thank you.
So now this is a new look compared to things that you've seen before. We asked the universities to report on the number of class sections that they offer based on the enrollment, the student enrollment in those classes. So these are undergraduate class sections, so you get a sense of how the schedule fills and kind of the formats that are offered as it relates to how much the classes are filled. So I'll point out two things that I think are trends, and this is a great example where if you go far enough efficient, it would be bad because all of your classes would be over 100 students and wouldn't be a great student experience. However, if we look on the small end, we have classes that are in the 2 to 9 range, and at both ASU and U of A, those numbers are greater than 10%. At NAU, it's a little closer to 5 to 7%. I like to think of this as sort of the lubrication that makes the scheduling system work. Like, you need a certain amount of low classes to help make sure that students that might be the 51st person to sign up for the class actually gets the class that they need to graduate. So there are plenty of reasons in the way the classes are set up or the way schedules are built that might justify a low number there. But I've heard questions about what that number should be and what that looks like.
Just a point of information, so at ASU, for all required classes, an additional section must be added even for one student.
And then just spread the enrollment out over the other.
Maybe, but I mean, every required class must be available whenever it's supposed to be available to whatever number of students arrive,
Even if that's one.
even if it's one.
Yeah.
Now, you might get 10 in there and take them out of somewhere else, but yes.
So,
That was not the case for a long time and is the case now.
So another observation in this space would be if you look at each of the universities in its totality, then the question is, what is the distribution of class sizes that are ultimately offered? And if you look at really ASU and NAU, what you see here is that there's a number of classes in the larger class formats, and the bulk is in that kind of 10 to 30 range in terms of class sizes. When you look at U of A, you have a smaller percentage in the large format classes, and you have a sort of significant cutoff where it looks like the vast majority of the classes are offered with fewer than 30 students in it. Again, that may be a choice based on how to staff those classes. Similarly, it might be a constraint based on the facilities, what the classroom sizes are, and so forth. But a point worth observing. So shifting gears yet again, now we shift away from this sort of administrative and space piece to student services costs per student. So this is just how much the university is spending on things that are directly supporting students, i.e. advising and recruitment, enrollment, and so forth. And again, you can see how the universities compare to each other as well as how they compare to their peers. And we quickly shift to a short history, and you get a little bit of a sense of the trends in that space. So then shifting to a more instructional bent, we have a student to faculty ratio at each of the universities. Again, you can see there that the U Arizona has the most sort of student-friendly, low student to faculty ratios, with ASU on the higher end. I do reiterate that each of these universities, though, is operating at a different scale, and that the U Arizona's includes veterinary education, medical education, and other things. So that may be bending those numbers. But again, within the context of the peer groups, it looks like NAU and ASU are actually pretty proactively efficient in this space, being on the slightly higher end of the range.
Say that.
Includes online.
So then we move to student to staff ratio, which is the same idea. So these are non-instructional staff members per student, both on campus and online. And you get a similar trend where ASU and NAU are on the higher half of their respective peer group. And U Arizona is quite low, though not that far off the median of its peer group. So by Arizona standards, UA is has quite a high ratio there, but by national standards, it's somewhere in the middle. So then we move to a metric about IT costs per employee and student on campus. And again, this one speaks for itself to a degree. Looked at the overall central and distributed IT spend and compared that to the on-campus and online students as well as on-campus employees. And here's a space where the University of Arizona leads the pack in that regard.
This is the centralization versus decentralization issue. Yes, sir.
So we then move to employee turnover rates, where lower turnover rates would obviously be economically good. And one thing that jumps out here, and I would defer real interpretation to those HR professionals that work in this space, but it is clear that University of Arizona has overall lower turnover rates there, while NAU and ASU are a bit higher. If I were to editorialize, I would say it makes sense because especially in the classified and professional staff space, ASU has a lot more employer competition, being in Metro Phoenix for staff employees. NAU similarly has a very high cost of living in Flagstaff, so that I imagine that impacts turnover rates especially in the staff ranks. And the U Arizona in many ways is the employer of choice in Tucson, so hopefully that is part of what contributes to their excellence in this area. So then here's another new look back to the idea of facilities utilization. So we polled the universities on the amount of time that their classrooms were scheduled. And this is only focusing on centrally scheduled classrooms at the university to get a sense of how often during the business week their spaces are used. This is another one of those kind of lubrication type themes where to have an exceptionally high rate means that you're probably not having very smooth operations because you have a shortage of space. To have a very low rate may suggest that you're underutilizing or maybe don't need additional facilities. So in this case, I don't think we're far enough along to draw which numbers are good or bad. One thing I will tell you is that 2021 is the earliest number shown on these. And in each of these circumstances, 2021 was a COVID year, meaning we were highly underutilizing our spaces at that time. So I would expect those numbers to be quite low.
2021, all of our classes were offered physically, also, all of them.
So then I think we're heading into the final stretch. We were looking at student housing. So we pulled two metrics in this space. One of those was the percentage of the overall student housing inventory that's offered by third parties. So this shows kind of a tale of three different options where ASU has worked to have a high degree of third-party offered private housing as part of, or privately operated housing as part of the university portfolio. NAU has begun working that into university housing, while the University of Arizona has generally shied away from that outside of, I think, one recent project. So you have a sense there, not necessarily good, bad, but a sort of explanatory piece of information. The other piece, though, that is a little bit paired with that is that we looked for the waiting lists for student housing at the universities. And ASU and NAU are fairly negligible in that regard, while the University of Arizona has swiftly growing rates of waiting lists at the universities. So I don't think we can go so far as to say that one is linked to the other, beyond to say it gives us a sense of the context in which housing is being operated at each of the schools. And then we move to themes of sustainability and energy efficiency. So we pulled two metrics here, one about energy use per person and one about water use per person. So again, the charts sort of speak to themselves. I will point out one obvious piece of context is scale of the university's footprint, another, and research mission and so forth, intensity of use. And another quite obvious one is that Northern Arizona University is a more temperate climate and therefore has different types of demand as it relates to water and energy use. But here we are with energy use per person and water use per person. And these are on-campus persons. And with that, I applaud your patience and apologize for the monologue, but I'm here to entertain any questions. The universities have also brought forward many of their experts who were involved in pulling this data and maybe can help be my wingman or woman in terms of explaining any questions you have with whatever time we have left.
Thank you, Brad. I want to first thank Regent Herbold for leading this initiative, and Brad and the staff from AWOR, Andrew Conry and Jane Kuhn, and all the staff behind the scene from the university, from the three universities, to pull the data together. So if there's any question or comments.
I do, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. Also, compliments, thank you, Regent, for taking this on, and the CFOs. Look, I think this is a very useful tool. We can learn from it, useful. So I'm enthusiastic, but two caveats. One is that the universities have different missions. And so we do need to put the data into the context of the differentiation of each of the universities. Online's a factor, College of Medicine is a factor, et cetera. So these are to some extent apples to apples, but to another extent really not. And so we do need to put the data into that context. And the second is that these are a new subset of metrics which come on the heels of work that Regent Penley and Manson and others did to do performance metrics, qualitative metrics, and to some extent, many of these metrics will be in conflict with those. And so we need to put that in context, that sometimes institutions are making certain trade-offs because they're getting, I don't want to say mixed signals from us, but they're trying to meet goals which are not naturally aligned. And so I would just urge people to look at mission, look at all the metrics holistically, and put these new data into that context.
I want to make one comment. First of all, Jane and Andrew and Morgan and Bjorn and Brad have put enormous efforts into the hard part of getting everybody to come to a common definition of how these things would be measured, which took a good 8 to 9 months. But it was a learning experience. And secondly, thanks to the same people for shepherding this along at the universities as we have collected the data, which again is no easy feat because everyone is interested in making sure they show properly, if you know what I mean. But I would urge the university presidents to not try to come up with too many excuses, okay, for why you're great. And simply learn from these because there are certain ones that really pop out in terms of some costs are too high, some things we're not taking full advantage of and the like. So seriously look at it and do some introspection as to ways that we could leverage this stuff. We'll learn on the fly as the years go by, but by and large, there's some really robust learning here that I hope the universities will take advantage of.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I have one. What stand up for me was the housing for U of A. So what if we have any answer or for that question? It was 30%, yeah.
I don't know if anyone else wants to take a stab at this. Brad correctly recognized we only have really one commercial partnership, P3 partnership, for our Honors Village. That's the only one. We have about 9,000 beds on campus. But if you've been to the U of A, you know there's a street park, and basically right across the street, there's constant sighting of cranes, not birds, but structural cranes. And there's enormous amount of private apartments and opportunities for the students, and they generally choose those.
Okay.
But I think looking forward, we need to do more on campus and do as the other institution, particularly SU, and explore P3 partnerships to do more, to provide more housing for our students, U of A housing. Now, oftentimes, you know, there's great data that shows that if you're a first-year student, you perform better if you live on campus. And that usually means there's rules and regulations. If you go across the street and go to the apartments with less rules and regulations, maybe you don't perform as well. So it would be in our best interest to grow the number of beds that we have, because you see the waiting list that we have.
Thank you, President Robin. Any other question?
Just
Here-
one more comment, if I could. And I don't know how far we want to go down into weeds on this, but as I reviewed this data before the meeting, you know, the class sizes, we were, as part of our strategic plan, looking at trying to study to the test of U.S. News and World Report rankings and having smaller class sizes because, you know, we thought that was important, a better experience for the students. But as with these data and other data, I think there's great opportunity for us to improve our efficiency, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah. Thank you, President Robbins. Any other comments or question? Hear none. This was a discussion item, so we're moving to item number 4, which is the University of Arizona requesting to sell 2 parcels of residential property in Tucson. Ryan Goodell will be presenting the next 3 real estate items. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Chair Mata. Regents, good afternoon. Again, my name is Ryan Goodell. I'm the Vice President for Facilities, Operations, and Campus Planning at the University of Arizona. Item 4, we are asking the committee to review and recommend forwarding to the full board for approval the sale of 2 parcels of residential real property located at the southwest corner of 6th Street and Campbell Avenue in Tucson, Pima County, Arizona, to S.J. Cummings Properties, LLC, including waiver of ABOR policy requiring the real property to be sold at public auction. The first parcel in question fronts along Campbell Avenue, and we are surrounded by, Scott Cummings is the owner's name, Scott Cummings Property all around us. The second parcel is an alleyway that runs east-west just on the northern boundary of our South Stadium garage, and also abuts Scott Cummings Property to the north. As part of this sale, we would retain an easement for ingress and egress, maintenance and operations over the alley. And also, there are public utilities in the alley, so it will not be built upon. Scott Cummings is currently in the process of working through the city's process to implement a planned area development, or PAD, on his property, under which he envisions a mixed-use development with restaurants, retail, residential, and some on-site garage parking. As you can see on the maps, our properties, again, are surrounded by his and are critical for his development to go forward. We had the properties appraised. I will note that we had them appraised as if the PAD was already approved, and so the mixed-use zoning applied for $524,000, which obviously increased the value of the property rather than the as-is value today. Scott is willing to pay the purchase price, and we are asking for the waiver of the ABOR policy to sell the property directly to Scott Cummings, as it's in our best interest to see the property developed. Again, this property is located right at the southeast corner of our campus, so it's one of the main gateways into the campus. Having a mixed-use development there would increase, visitor guest experience. Overall, good thing for the university. Proceeds from the sale from this property would be used to address deferred maintenance needs on campus at a future date, I'm sure. And I will pause for questions.
Thank you. There's any question from the board? Here, thought it was, yeah. No. Here none, thank you. I'm going to do motion by motion.
Okay.
Yeah. So I move that the committee forward to the board for approval the sale of 2 parcels of residential real estate located at the southwest corner of 6th Street and Campbell Avenue in Tucson, Pima County, Arizona, to C.J. Cummins Properties LLC, including waiver of ABOR policy requiring real property to be sold at public auction as described in the executive summary. If there is a second,
Second.
thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. All in, any opposed, any abstention? Motion passes. So we have, the floor is yours again for continuing with the next real estate item, which the second real estate would be described for the Ames Distributor Learning Center in Douglas, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
With this item, we are asking the committee to review and recommend forwarding to the full board for approval the sale of real property located at 2017 Rogers Avenue in Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, to the City of Douglas, a municipal corporation, including the waiver of ABOR policy requiring the real property to be sold at public auction. This property was acquired by the university in 2014 from Dr. Michael and Gail Ames with the intent that the College of Veterinary Medicine would operate a clinical education on the property. It is, again, known as the Ames Distributed Learning Center. It's comprised of 2 buildings on the site, one a veterinary clinic and a kennel, and a warehouse building, and sits on about 3 acres of property. We currently have a lease with the city that operates its animal control center on the property, and the city contracts with the county to operate the kennel function on the property. That agreement's been in place since 2007, so about 7 years before we actually obtained the property. With our College of Veterinary Medicine locating up in Oro Valley, unfortunately, we don't have a programmatic need for the property, and the city has asked if they could acquire it directly from us so that it may continue its operations. We had the property appraised for $560,000, which the city is willing to pay. Hence why we're asking for the waiver of ABOR policy to allow us to sell the property directly to the city so it can continue the operation. We understand there's very low number of services like this in Cochise County, and the sale would allow them to continue operating as such.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Here none, and this is another action item. I move that the committee forward to the board for approval the sale of real property located at 2017 Rogers Avenue in Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, to the City of Douglas, a municipal corporation, including waiver of ABOR policy requiring real property to be sold at public auction as described in the executive summary. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion's carries. So we have another item, which is the sale of property known as the University Services Annex USA buildings, including waiver of ABOR policy requiring real property to be sold at public auction for the University of Arizona. Ryan, you continue to present this one, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Mata. In this item, we're asking the committee to review and recommend forwarding to the full board for approval the sale of real property located at 220 West 6th Street in Tucson, Pima County, Arizona, to the Tucson Unified School District, including waiver of ABOR policy requiring real property to be sold at public auction. This property, which again is we refer to as the University Services Annex or USA building, was acquired by the university in 2001. It was acquired when we were doing some development on the north side of campus and needed a relocation opportunity for several departments. The property is comprised of 2 buildings, about 95,000 square feet in total, and just under 7 acres. We, about a year ago, started an initiative to relocate the departments currently in the USA building back to other space on campus in an effort to maximize the utilization of our space on campus, reduce our operational costs, and ultimately to prepare this property for disposition. TUSD is interested in the property. Its intent would be to consolidate its administrative units all in one location, centrally located in the city. Right now, they're dispersed throughout. We had 2 appraisals on this property, which justify the purchase price of $11,350,000 plus the $250,000 for the miscellaneous furniture, fixtures, and equipment that will remain on the property when sold. TUSD is willing to pay the purchase price. Their board has reviewed and approved the draft purchase and sale agreement. And TUSD is also in the process of selling its administrative building to then acquire this property. We are asking for a waiver of ABOR policy in this case, as it's in the best interest of the university. We've got, TUSD is a willing buyer paying the fair market value for the property. They're also willing to lease back a small amount of space if we need to, given the short timeline, for a few months until we can relocate the final unit or two. It's also a good thing for the community, having TUSD, an educational institution, a good feeder school for the University of Arizona located in one central location. I will take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. So any questions? Yeah.
Just one quick question. The sale is not contingent upon them selling their building.
It's, they're happening simultaneously. So the board has already approved the sale of their, what they call the 1010 administrative building.
Okay, so they already have a buyer under contract.
They do have a buyer under contract. They're going forward together, correct?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other question? Here none. This is another action item. So I move that the committee forward to the board for approval the sale of real property located at 220 West 6th Street in Tucson, Pima County, Arizona, to the Tucson Unified School District, including waiver of ABOR policy requiring real estate property to be sold at public auction as described in the executive summary. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. So, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Regents.
Sorry, yeah.
One observation, just for clarity's sake, these are all things that were in the works for a long time. These three transactions are totally unrelated to the current circumstances on
Yes.
campus. So anyone who wants to try and connect dots that should not be connected, please don't.
Yes. Thank you, Regent
Excellent
Goodyear, for that comment. Yes. Okay, so item number 7 is the discussion of legislation affecting the university enterprise. Our new government affairs lead, Thomas Atkins, is here from the ABOR office. And Thomas, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, thank you. I'm here to provide a very uplifting, emotionally fulfilling
Emotionally
briefing on the
charged.
state legislature. Chair, Regents, Presidents, I'm grateful for this opportunity to be before you. As mentioned, my name is Thomas Adkins. This is month 3 for me at the Board of Regents, but this is my 19th legislative session. So I'm really grateful to be part of this organization and the great work that the board is doing. As I mentioned, this is my first session, so with that said, I am very reliant and want to take a moment to acknowledge the great work that the government affairs staffs at the individual universities perform. They're good partners and a critical need for me, or critical asset for me as I do this work on the board's behalf. I also want to mention, joining me in the audience today is Xavier Leal. Xavier, stand up. Xavier is our legislative intern this session. Xavier is a senior at Arizona State majoring in political science, and we were able to select him through the highly competitive Arizona Legislative Internship Program. So we're really grateful for Xavier's work for the board. So setting the stage at the Capitol, the current session remains one that's pretty contentious. There is a lot of well, we'll just say that it's a contentious session, and I'll leave the editorializing aside. But the work that the Republicans have in the legislature, their biggest challenge will be finding common ground with the governor in developing a state budget. This is their singular constitutional duty, and so working with the governor to find that common ground will be a difficult challenge for them, given that it's an election year for all of them, but not one for the governor. So many Capitol watchers are, in fact, anticipating a longer session, which is unfortunate for everyone. In terms of the budget, I just want to mention that the biggest challenge in reaching common ground is the fact that the revenue shortfall projections in both the executive and legislative budget are significant. Unfortunately, their projected shortfalls do not match. The legislative baseline budget anticipates a shortfall that is on the neighborhood of 400 million plus, greater than the legislative greater than the executive's baseline budget. And that's just for this fiscal year. Next fiscal year, the shortfall in revenue projections is somewhere in the neighborhood of $380 million. So in developing the budget, the Joint Appropriations Committees are going through their annual process of meeting with the various agencies. The three universities are scheduled to present next on the 31st, as that next Tuesday, I believe. And I believe actually the board might even have a small role in that presentation, as I understand. As Regent Manson mentioned, we are really appreciative and grateful for the governor to include funding in her budget for Arizona Promise and for the AZ Healthy Tomorrow initiative. The governor's support will be the key for getting funding for these programs continuing. And on that topic, as you received a presentation on the AZ Healthy Tomorrow initiative, the Senate Health and Human Services Committee last week received a presentation from ASU Health and NAU Health that was quite informative. It was well received, and there was good Q&A from members of both parties to both organizations. Looking onto legislation, before you is a list of bills that we're tracking. I want to mention that this is not yet a comprehensive list of legislation. To date, there's been a little over 1,100 bills that have been introduced, but this is probably only about 2/3 of the total that will ultimately be introduced later this session. The Senate has until next Monday to introduce legislation. The House has an additional week beyond that. So on average, if history is a predictor of the future, we fully anticipate seeing in the neighborhood of 1,700, 1,800 pieces of legislation introduced. That is a significant number, and part of our role in working with the government affairs teams at the universities is to sort through those bills and to flag any of those which might have an impact on the university system. To sort through those bills, of course, we use the board's legislative policy positions that they have adopted. We use those policy positions as the filter through which we sift through the legislation and flag bills. Of course, we rely on the subject matter experts internally within the board office and also within the three universities to help us gauge the magnitude and significance on any given piece of legislation. So I mentioned the bill deadline. I'm just going to hit quickly a few bills. I know John told me I needed to keep this to a tight 45 minutes, but I will try to beat that just a little bit.
What's 4.5?
Oh, all right. I will increase the speed. Just a few bills of a particular note that I want to make sure that the board is aware of. You likely already are, but just will mention them nevertheless. I'll begin with Senate Bill 1152. This is a unique bill, one that I've never seen in my 19 years at the legislature. This bill essentially attempts to defund Arizona State University by clawing back upwards of $548 million from the current fiscal year budget and transferring it back to the state general fund. I will set aside any comments, but the bill has been assigned to two committees, Education and Appropriations, but has not yet received a hearing in either one. We'll see how that plays out. House Bill 2178 has to do with student fees. This bill passed the House Education Committee this week on a party line vote. This bill would essentially allow individual students to pick and choose which clubs on campus receive their funding. Aside from creating what we believe to be a fairly significant administrative burden for the universities, there's also the outside chance that this will have the unintended consequence of benefiting those clubs that are the largest, maybe even most controversial or most effective at student engagement and student outreach. And that will also be detrimental, we think, to those small clubs and new clubs that are just trying to get off the ground. There's two other student fee bills that are out there, Senate Bills 1040 and 1150. They're both very similar. I think they're identical, actually. These would allow students to simply opt out of paying student activity fees if they meet certain criteria. Both bills have been assigned to Education Committee but have not yet appeared on an agenda. Senate Bill 1198 is the perennial Guns on Campus bill that has made its appearance. Like similar measures in the past that have failed to get through the process, this bill would prohibit the governing board of a university or college or community college from enacting or enforcing any policy or rule that would prohibit the possession of a concealed weapon by somebody with a valid CCW. Last night, and something that I haven't yet added to the list, we saw a handful of bills dropped late last night that would have a direct impact to the Board of Regents. I'm still doing an analysis of those and will provide an update into the future. But a couple of the key noteworthy provisions that stood out to me would that it would require all of the academic units at the universities to post online all of their course material prior to courses beginning. This would include the syllabi, the curriculum vitae of the instructors, the number of students that have taken the class, a whole host of information. Some of the bills would also amend the free expression statutes that would outline a disciplinary process for employees as well as students. The students is what's in statute currently. And then an interesting one to me, I was working at the legislature when this original bill passed, but one of the bills would require an additional report from the universities to the board stating their compliance or updating the board on their compliance with current statutes requiring a flag, Constitution, and Bill of Rights be posted in each classroom. And so we'll, but all three of the, or actually it's I think 6 bills that have been introduced. I'll sort through those and I'll provide greater analysis forthcoming. In trying to find some positive news in the legislation, there was one bill I just want to highlight that I thought was a relatively good news bill, and that's House Bill 2579. This bill would provide a $1,000 refundable tax credit to any student that's Pell eligible that attends a public university in Arizona. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Thomas. Are there any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes, Regent Herbold.
Could you elaborate on this clawback of ASU money?
Sure. Chair, Regent, the bill is rather brief, and essentially it simply states that the appropriation from last year, or what's left of it, up to $548 million and change, is to be transferred from Arizona State University back to the state general fund. There's no legislative intent portion that's tied to it, but the sponsor is Senator Kern.
Do you have any idea why he put this together?
So, Chair, Regent, I would hate to speculate on motives.
I think I'm not supposed to ask that.
We'll tell you later.
No good can come from that.
Yeah,
Never
thank you.
mind.
Download. Regent Finley.
Let me transition.
That's okay.
On
I got the message.
HB 2039, the Provisional Community College, could you offer some additional explanation of the rationale for this bill?
Thank you, Chair. Regent Finley.
Oh, yeah.
So in looking at 2039, we're trying to understand the core motivations of Representative Cook in sending the bill. Essentially what the bill does is it allows a provisional community college to get accreditation through a public or private post-secondary institution. I believe current law just allows a provisional community college to get that accreditation covered by another community college district, and this broadens it from just another district to any public university or college, public or private. We believe that this may have something to do with a community college district or provisional district in a rural area that had previously affiliated with Eastern Arizona College that no longer does and is seeking to find a partnership there. But candidly, we're still sorting through the bill and some of its ramifications to better understand what it would look like if it were to affiliate, say, hypothetically with a private post-secondary educational institution. The bill really just speaks to accreditation and not necessarily any of the other abilities of a community college district, such as a property tax. But that's, as a, we'll call it paranoid guy, those are some of my primal instincts to sort of look through that. And I'm very sensitive to those sort of things. I've asked Brad on occasion for his advice on it, but I will get more information to you.
Thank you. Regent Sagarosi.
Thomas, thanks for your presentation. I really enjoyed it and for going in depth on some of these bills. Regarding House Bill 2178, how soon do you believe that would come to a floor vote if that should come to pass? And if it does come to pass, do you have any projections as to what the outcome might be?
Chair, Regent Zargos, a great question. Part of this job is a lot of reading of the tea leaves to try to forecast that. The bill passed on a party line vote, and so, but one of the co-sponsors is of the Democratic Party, so I anticipate that the bill will probably move through the process at what I would say is an average course. So traditionally, a bill that passes out of committee on a Tuesday or Wednesday will probably appear on the Rules and Caucus agendas the following Tuesday. And then when it goes to the floor, it really just can depend and be variable. So I would anticipate that the bill, assuming it moves through the process, would make it to the floor sometime in February, but it could be sooner. And that's just in the House of origin. Assuming it has the votes to pass and move over to the Senate, that process will replicate. At some point, if it is to progress, it would have to pass through the Senate committee by mid to late March. So I'm trying to put kind of a framework around when that could make it to the floor in the Senate. So it will depend. So a final vote at the legislature probably would be in the March to April, but it also depends on the budget. Sometimes budget negotiations cause the legislative process to stall out, and bills move at a much slower pace as leadership is hesitant to allow bills to move forward until they have commitments of budget support from sponsors. So we'll see how it goes. And then in terms of the outcome, we're working on that. We'll see how it goes. I hesitate to predict a vote, but we'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or question? Here none. Thank you so much, Thomas. This was an agenda item for discussion and does not require board action. So we're moving to item number A, which is a presentation and discussion of financial policy revisions and financial monitoring enhancements. As indicated today, the board has been highly focused on the University of Arizona's fiscal health. In December, we had a special board meeting and received a report from President Robbins on the university's budget, as well as his remediation plan. The board also adopted financial oversight enhancements and expectations for all three universities to guide financial processes and board governance. As part of its increased oversight of the university's budget and financial operations, the board is reviewing its financial policies, including requirements for the type and frequency of financial reporting. So Regent Herbold and I are working on the boards, are working together with the board staff and the CFOs to review each of the board's policies and develop recommendations for improvement. We will have Brad Kindred from the AWAR office to present this item. And I want to say that Chair Duval tasked us to continue working on this until we have this evolve to the next level. It's your, Brad.
Thank you, Regent Mata. Regent Mata just gave a great introduction, kind of reminding us where this information came from. So at this point, we're in the part of the process where we're both working with the university, as you heard from John Arnold earlier, as well as working at the overall system level financial oversight processes. So back in December, the board approved a series of principles and some additional enhancements to reporting. And in order to move forward with those, we both need to develop the policy to make it an official thing, as well as develop the tools to move forward and have something for the board to review. So in terms of framing that, what you see in front of you in very small writing, but you should have in front of you on paper as well, is a little bit of a calendar for what our current ABOR reporting cycle looks like. So right now, there are really 4 major touch points per year. There used to be 5 with tuition, but now that's on a multi-year cycle, so it doesn't fall in that spring slot anymore. But in January, we typically talk about the university's annual financial review, which is a review of a series of financial metrics to gauge university fiscal health. We also have the report on investments and financial status updates, which are typically seen as like a quarterly financial status update. One thing I will note right now is that in order to kind of elevate this issue and continue the ongoing conversation in the current context, we've moved the annual financial reviews, which would normally happen at this meeting, to our February board meeting. So the board will hear a bigger discussion of university finances at the board level in February. Like I just had mentioned, in March, we would typically look at tuition and fee proposals from the universities as well as revenue forecasts, but that is now a multi-year cycle, so that doesn't appear here. In June, we do our quarterly financial status updates as well as review annual operating budgets, so that those are the university's plans for the next fiscal year, given what we know about the legislative cycle that's ending at that point, and provide the university an opportunity to foreshadow and have the board approve that. In August, we review legislative budget requests. So those are the requests of the university system, each of the 3 universities in the board office, to the Arizona governor and legislature as part of the beginning of the annual budget setting process. And that also includes a required annual report on debt capacity. Those are presented to the board in August and typically submitted to the state government in September. And then in November, we kind of close the year out with the publishing of the annual comprehensive financial report. So those are the annual financial statements of the universities, as well as, again, a financial status update. All of those reports are baked into a series of policies that I won't pain you with reading because I just said it out loud. But I wanted you to get a sense of what those policies look like as a reference piece. So we have a series that describe those things and what specifically needs to be included in each of those reports under the board's guidance. So here's a first set and a second set of what those updates look like. What we are proposing are some amendments and some additional policies in order to capture some of those themes that were discussed by the board, all of those themes that were approved by the board back in December. So here are the new things that we're talking about. One of those is a policy on university financial management principles that encapsulates some of those ideas that the board had approved around having a centralized university-wide viewpoint in prioritization and budgeting processes at the universities, having centralized management of IT practices and policies, budgetary controls that prevent overspending and that manage exposure related to institutionally funded financial aid for out-of-state students, and requiring board approval for cash reserves that expenditures that fall out of line with the board's existing policy. So we'll have one piece of language for the board to review in the next cycle around that. The rest of these are related to financial reporting. So policy 3407 covers financial status updates. We're looking at amending that item in order to adjust timing to reflect our current practice, which is actually 3 report outs per year on that setup, along with the natural business cycle, as well as adding an element to compare budget to actual revenue and expenditures, both in the current year and prior year.
Brad,
Yes.
very briefly, so adjust timing from quarterly to 3 times per year, that's less often?
Yes. Which is what is currently reporting out as it relates to what is called quarterly reporting. However, the next item talks about adding more frequent reporting that will either overlap with or replace that.
Okay.
So then we have a new policy on financial liquidity. So right now the board has standards for financial liquidity, but no related reporting on that. So we want to create a monthly or quarterly report, and that's the work that Regent Herbold and Regent Mata are working with CFOs and board staff on, to have more frequent reporting for the board that specifically focuses on financial liquidity as well as those routine financial updates from the universities. And then the last piece of policy in this space would be around the annual business process review, which allows the universities to come together as part of a tri-university gathering to share best practices, but more importantly, establishes the triennial reviews of financial business processes, where we have peer review teams from the sister universities work with the board staff to go and help to document and assess universities' financial practices so that everyone is in an effective space and staying up to date. Regent Herbold?
Yeah.
One of the things that we want to do with the CFOs is to understand what they use on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis to watch out so they're not falling into a financial trap. So what we may learn is that, hey, there's some existing good practices at ASU or NAU or a UA that we want to capture and potentially do something more than just quarterly. But we also probably need to take the quarterly session a bit more serious and put more emphasis on having the president present and take questions and understand and generate energy about fixing certain things. So we've got some territory to cover here, because right now, the current practice of seeing this, and I don't think it's taken as seriously as it should be. And secondly, we don't have enough short-term alerts that could help us see a trend that potentially can get us into problems. So deeply appreciate the work that these guys are doing. That is Morgan and Bjorn and John, in terms of, first of all, pulling together their ideas. And then we have a meeting scheduled on the 6th of February to massage all that and see where it's going to go. And I don't think it should take us a long time to develop this stuff, to tell you the truth, because what we want is the obvious that we should be starting to panic about. So hopefully this will not take as long as the previous measures that we had to develop. So it's really a very good thing to have in our hip pocket to watch carefully.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Regent Herbal. You want to continue?
Yep. So once we're done with this, this is what our annual process would then look like. So we're currently looking at slotting in those financial reviews into our spring reporting. And then, as you see across the bottom, that monthly or quarterly financial updating that Regent Herbal was talking about, becoming a more consistent touch point so that the board has that material available. So by way of timeline, so that you know what to expect, those policy proposals, language is in development right now to make those things actually happen. And we would expect those to be read as part of the June board committee, or committee and board meeting cycle, or sorry, April committee and board meeting cycle, which means final adoption would be in the June cycle. As far as reporting tools, as Regent Herbal just noted, the universities will be sharing notes tomorrow with our teams. And then on February 6th, we'll come together to begin the process of putting a tool together, again, with our hope to bring something, or at least an update, if not a final product, to the April 4th committee meeting. And in the meanwhile, it's worth noting that as we continue to work with the universities, we are not kind of setting this aside as something that we will get to over the next couple of meetings. We're remaining in touch with the universities through these processes to make sure that they are actively assessing what it is that they are doing and kind of staying on top of their issues, especially these kind of current liquidity issues, and have a commitment that they'll communicate any concerning or material trends to board staff immediately so that we can definitely stay on top of this and manage risk while we're trying to put more routine tools in place.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Regent.
I want to thank you and the CFOs that are working with us, because the board is really taking seriously the oversight and increased oversight of the financials, budget of operations of the university. So it will be a lot of work behind the scene that we will be focusing on, and you will be able to present to the next meeting. So if there's any questions or comments by any regents?
Just appreciate the efforts.
Yeah, okay, here none. This was an agenda item for discussion and does not require board action. So our next item is the review of the proposed revision of ABOR policy 4-105 fees. And again, Brad, this is your item.
Thank you, Regent Mata. Last one, I promise. So we have a policy that the board adopted as a result of an Auditor General finding that requires the universities to review any mandatory fees, including academic course fees, that are in place at least once every 10 years. So for the last several years, they've been going through that process and reporting back annually to the board which fees were reviewed in order to ensure that those fees remain relevant, tied to active courses, and so forth. Good housekeeping in the fee space. Right now, the way the policy is written, it is tied to the annual tuition and fee setting process. However, we no longer have an annual tuition and fee setting process. So this item is simply amending the language to allow the executive director more discretion as to when to schedule that annual sunset review agenda item. So our intention, even though tuition and fees has moved into a fall conversation, our intention is to still review the sunset agenda item late in each spring.
Thank you. Is there any question? Here none, this is an action item, so I move that the committee forward to the board on its first reading, the proposed revision to A-Board Policy 4-105 fees as described in the executive summary. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion passes. The next item is the review of the proposed revision to A-Board Policy 1-116, Settlement of Claims and Litigation. Samantha Blevins from A-Board Office will be presenting this item. Samantha, please proceed. Thank you.
The proposed amendments will increase the university's delegated settlement authority from $50,000 to $250,000. This increased settlement authority will match the state's ability to settle cases without JLBC approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any question? Here none. I move that the committee forward, since this is an action item, I move that the committee forward to the board on its first reading, the proposed revision to A-Board Policy 1-116, Settlement of Claims and Litigation as described in the executive summary. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you all for being here today. This concludes our January 25th, 2024 University Governance and Operation Committee. We're all adjourned.